Wind clawed through the gaps in the old boarding house, carrying needles of ice that cut straight to the bone. The place looked ready to collapse, but the woman standing inside it, she didn't bend an inch. Marian Locke gripped her father's old Winchester with frostbitten fingers, the barrel pointed square at the stranger on her porch. Behind her, 5 hungry children clung to her patched skirts, breathing little clouds of white in the freezing air. Outside, the storm roared like a living thing. Inside, you could hear every heartbeat, and still she didn't back away. "You want this land?" Marian said through cracked lips. "Then you're going to have to step over me and my family to take it." Jesse Calder had come to seize her property for the railroad. He hadn't expected to walk into something worth dying for. Now the story begins. In the winter of 1886, mercy was rarer than gold dust in the Dakota frontier. Snow came hard and without warning, swallowing the prairie in white silence. Jesse Calder pushed his stallion through drifts that rose to the horse's chest. The wind slapped his face raw and stole the breath from his lungs, but he didn't slow down. Not tonight. Not when the survey team was waiting. Not when every day of delay threatened his entire railroad project. Behind him, his surveyor, Boyd Fletcher, shouted something the wind immediately tore away. Jesse didn't bother answering. Ahead, through the swirling white, a dark outline appeared. A boarded-up structure, a sagging porch, smoke barely surviving in the torn chimney. The Locke boarding house, 10 acres of land sitting on the only workable route through Coal Ridge Pass. Jesse's jaw tightened. This was the last obstacle between his railroad and completion. This weather, this wreck of a house, this widow, and tonight he intended to settle it. The front porch groaned under Jesse's boots. He knocked once, firm, deliberate, the kind of knock that said he wasn't leaving until he got what he came for. Silence. Then quick footsteps. Light. Nervous. The door cracked open just enough for a small face to peek through. A girl, maybe 11, sharp-eyed and far too thin for winter. Her black hair was tied with a piece of yarn, and her bare feet were red from cold. "Mama says we ain't buying nothing," the girl said. "I'm not selling," Jesse replied. "I'm here for Mrs. Locke. It's about her property." Her eyes widened in fear and anger combined. "You're the railroad man." "I'm a railroad man," Jesse corrected gently. "Is your mother home, Rose?" A voice sliced through the room like a blade. "Rose, step away from that door." The child vanished. The door started to swing shut, but Jesse caught it with his boot. "Mrs. Locke," he said, "I rode 20 miles in a blizzard. Least you can do is open the door." "The least I can do," the woman replied from somewhere inside the dark, "is shoot you for stepping onto my porch uninvited." When the door finally opened, Jesse stepped inside, and 3 things hit him at once. Cold, darkness, and the smell of a home burning anything it could find just to stay alive. The main room was shadowed and empty except for mismatched chairs, a table with one leg shorter than the others, and a stove barely alive with heat. Frost coated the insides of the windows. A thin sheet of ice clung to the water bucket by the wall. And then he saw her. Marian Locke. She stood near the stove, wrapped in a quilt so old it looked more thread than cloth. Her braid hung down her back, loose and frayed from days without rest. Her face, though young, was carved with the kind of tiredness only grief could make. But her hands? Her hands were steady as she pointed the Winchester at his chest. 5 minutes, she said. "Speak your piece." 5 children appeared then. Not 3, 5. All different ages, all hollow-cheeked and silent from hunger and cold. Rose stood protectively in front of them. "This is my family," Marian said, though he hadn't asked. "Rose, Jacob, Millie, Tom, and baby Elsie. I want them to see the man who's trying to throw them into the snow on Christmas Eve." Jesse felt something twist in him, something he hadn't felt in years. But he kept his voice even. "I'm offering to purchase your land at more than fair value," he said. "Enough for you to relocate somewhere better than this." "Better," she snapped. "Where? Into a town that mocks widows? To people who think a woman alone is something to judge instead of help? To a city that eats the poor alive?" Her hands trembled with fury not fear. And where exactly would you suggest I move 5 children, Mr. Calder? Into the kindness of strangers. Jesse swallowed hard. That isn't my concern, he heard himself say. Her laugh was sharp and bitter. Of course it isn't. My children starving isn't your concern. My little boy crying for a father who won't ever come home isn't your concern. The cold that keeps them awake at night isn't your concern. She stepped closer. But it is mine. Mrs. Locke, Jesse said, trying to soften his tone. I don't want to hurt you. I'm trying to strike a deal that works for both sides. Both sides? Marian snapped. You have rails, engines, a dozen men, and investors breathing down your neck. What do I have? A house full of hungry children and a promise I made to my dying husband. She moved toward the stove, opened the lid, and Jesse nearly choked. Inside the flames were not logs. They were pages. Books. She was burning books. My husband taught school before he worked the mines, she said. These were his journals, his teaching materials. I've been feeding them to the stove for 3 days because we ran out of wood. Jesse exhaled slowly. Mrs. Locke, no. You listen. She pointed toward the boarded-up walls. This place isn't just land to me. It's my husband's dream, and I will not break the promise I made him. Not for you. Not for your railroad. Not for anyone. Marian reached in her apron and unfolded a piece of paper. It was a map. Hand-drawn. Precise. Detailed. I have an alternate route, she said. 3 miles north through Laurel Bend. Jesse blinked. You drew this? Yes. I taught mathematics before I became a miner's wife. I know terrain. I know grade percentages. I know your engines can climb a 3% incline if you build the approach correctly. He stared at the paper. Her notes. Her calculations. The route was harder. More expensive. But possible. This widow, this frozen, desperate woman. She was brilliant. And she was right. But Jesse couldn't say that. Not yet. This would cost my company an extra $40,000, he said. Cheaper than the lawsuits I'll file, she replied calmly. Cheaper than the newspaper stories about a railroad forcing out a widow with 5 children. Cheaper than the trouble I promised to cause you in every courtroom between here and the Capitol. She wasn't bluffing. Jesse saw it in her eyes. He also saw something else. Strength. Fire. And a breaking point she was barely holding back. The youngest child, baby Elsie, began to cry. A soft, trembling sound. The sound of a child too cold to even wail properly. Marian scooped her up, wrapped her in a shawl with more holes than fabric. Mama, it's so cold, the little girl whispered. I know, sweetheart, Marian murmured, kissing her forehead. Mama's fixing it. Is he the bad man? Elsie pointed at Jesse with tiny shaking fingers. Her voice was thin, frightened. Jesse felt the question like a bullet. Her image hit him harder than any railroad negotiation or any winter storm. She reminded him of someone he had lost, someone he had buried deep behind walls of steel and duty. He swallowed hard. Mrs. Locke, he heard himself say, I'll survey your alternate route. She froze. You will. I'm not promising anything beyond that, he said quickly, refusing to let his voice crack. I'll give you 60 days. If your route stands, I'll fight for it. If not, you accept the railroad's offer. And in those 60 days, Marian asked cautiously, I'll stay in the boarding house, Jesse said. Oversee the survey personally. Her jaw dropped. You want to live here? Yes. You'd share food with us, heat with us, space with us? Yes. You expect me to feed a grown man when I can barely feed my children? No, Jesse said, pulling $50 from his coat. I'll pay in advance. When she saw the money, her breath hitched. Not greed, not joy, humiliation, pride, and relief so sharp it hurt to look at. She closed her eyes, then nodded. 1 month, she said. You stay 1 month. After that, we talk again. Jesse set the money on the table. Marian stared at it like it might disappear. Then she whispered, thank you. Not soft, not gentle, but honest. The children were watching, wide-eyed, silent, hope flickering in their faces like the first spark in a cold stove. Jesse looked at them and knew. Something in him had shifted. Something he couldn't undo. Something he wasn't ready to name. The storm eased by morning, but the cold inside the Locke boarding house clung to the walls like a stubborn ghost. Dawn crept through the frosted windows in thin gray stripes, touching the children first. Rose curled protectively around Millie, Jacob sitting upright with a look too serious for a boy's age, Tom wrapped in a blanket that barely reached his feet. Baby Elsie slept against Marian's chest, her breath warm but faint. Jesse Calder woke on the hard floor near the stove, boots still on, coat wrapped around him like a blanket. He had slept lightly, too lightly. Every creak of the house, every shift of the storm outside, every small sound from the children pulled him halfway from sleep. He hadn't stayed in a home with children in years. He wasn't sure he remembered how. He sat up, joints stiff, shoulders aching from days in the saddle. Marian glanced at him from across the room, her expression guarded, still wary, still ready to fight. "Morning," he said quietly. She nodded, but didn't speak, tightening her grip on baby Elsie as the child stirred. Jesse stood slowly, rubbing warmth back into his hands. "I'll check the fire." "You don't need to," Marian said. "I know." He fed the fire anyway, adding the few remaining chunks of wood from the box beside the stove. Each piece dropped with a hollow sound. There wasn't enough for one more night. Marian saw it too. She pulled her shawl tighter. "We'll make do." "You won't," he replied. "Not without more wood." Jacob spoke up from his corner. "I can chop wood, Mr. Calder. I ain't scared of it." Marian shot him a sharp look. "You're not touching an axe in this weather." Jacob didn't back down. "Someone's gotta help." "Someone will," Jesse said gently. "But not you." Jacob's eyes narrowed. "Mama doesn't need charity." Jesse met the boy's glare with calm. "Your mother also doesn't need a frozen son." Jacob looked away, jaw tight. His pride was a mirror of Marian's, fierce, hungry, shaped by too much hardship for someone so young. Jesse stood and reached for his coat. "I'll get wood." Marian stiffened. "You don't have to do that." "I know. Then why are you doing it?" Jesse paused at the door. "Because these children are freezing. Because their mother is carrying too much alone. Because the youngest reminded him of a daughter he would never hold again. Because something in this house kept pulling at him in ways he didn't understand." He didn't say any of that. Instead, he said simply, "You made a deal with me. That means we survive the month." He stepped out into the cold. The world outside was silent, a hollow, winter silence where sound sank into snow and never returned. Jesse walked toward the tree lean, breath turning white in the air. Frost clung to the pines, branches sagging under the heavy snowfall. He found a fallen tree, half buried, and set to work. Each swing of the axe was sharp and rhythmic. Crack, crack, crack. But with every swing came memories he didn't invite. A tiny hand gripping his thumb, a small voice calling Papa, a fever that burned through a little girl faster than any doctor could stop it. Jesse's jaw tightened. He swung harder. The past was a storm he had spent years outrunning. But in this frozen hollow on Marian Locke's land, the storm had found him again. When his arms finally weakened, he loaded the wood into a rope sling and carried it back, snow crunching under each step. Jacob saw him first through the window. "Mama!" He brought wood. The children rushed forward, swarming him before he even stepped inside. Rose tried to take some of the load. Tom tugged at his coat, eager to help. "Stand back," Marian ordered, ushering them away. "Give the man space." Jesse set the wood by the stove. "Should last a few days." Marian stared at the pile, as if it were a miracle she didn't trust. "You work fast," she said. "I had practice," he replied, brushing snow from his coat. Rose tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mama, can we make warm bread now?" Marian hesitated, just a flicker, but Jesse saw it. They had flour, but not enough. They had lard, but barely. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small canvas sack. "I brought supplies from town yesterday," he said. Didn't want to say anything until morning. Marian froze. "What supplies?" He held out the sack. "Coffee, flour, beans, some dried meat." Marian's expression changed, pride warring with desperation. "We don't take handouts." "It's not a handout," Jesse said. "I'm paying room and board." She frowned. "We don't offer room and board anymore." You do now. Rose's eyes brightened. Mama, please? Marian closed her eyes. Just 1 second. A silent battle. Then she nodded. All right. The children cheered. Jesse took a slow breath, letting the warmth of the moment settle. By noon the house smelled like warm bread and coffee. Tom sat cross-legged near the fire, elbows on his knees, watching the dough rise like magic. Rose braided Millie's hair with gentle hands. Jacob chopped carrots at the table, tongue between his teeth in concentration. Baby Elsie gurgled softly in Marian's lap, cheeks flushed with heat from the stove. And Marian looked different. Not safe, not relaxed, not happy, but alive. Color touched her cheeks again. Her hands shook less. Her voice softened when she spoke to the children. And Jesse watched it all from the corner of the room, arms folded, unable to pretend he wasn't moved by it. When the children went to the back room to play, Marian stood at the stove, stirring a pot. You didn't have to help like this, she said quietly. Not with the wood, not with the food. I know, he replied. So why? Her voice carried confusion, not accusation. You don't even know us. Jesse stared into the fire for a long moment. Maybe I don't have to know you, he said. Maybe I just need to know you're worth protecting. She turned sharply. Don't say that. Why? Because people don't protect us, Marian whispered. Not anymore. Her eyes glistened. Anger, fear, exhaustion all tangled together. Jesse took a single step closer. Well, he said, they do now. Marian looked away fast, swallowing hard. That evening, snow fell again, quiet, soft, thick. The kind of snowfall that buries a world inch by inch. Jesse sat with the children while Marian put baby Elsie to bed. Jacob asked about railroads. Rose asked about mountains. Tom asked if trains really made sparks. Jesse answered every question. Then Rose asked, Are you the bad man? The room fell silent. Jesse took a breath. No, he said, but I've done things I'm not proud of. Like what? Tom asked. Like forgetting what matters. Jesse said, the children didn't fully understand, but they understood enough. When Marian returned, she found Jesse reading from a book of Bible stories, one of the few not burned. The lamp flickered. The children gathered close, and Marian stood in the doorway, watching a stranger fit himself into their home like a missing piece. She didn't say a word, but something shifted inside her. Hope. Small, quiet, fragile, but alive. When the children slept, Jesse stepped outside to clear his thoughts. Snow drifted from the dark sky. Silence pressed down heavy. Marian followed him onto the porch, her shawl wrapped around her shoulders. You shouldn't be out here, he said. I needed air. They stood side by side, breath slipping into the cold. Mr. Calder, her voice was soft, barely a whisper. Can I ask you something? Of course. If my map doesn't work, if your company rejects the alternate route, will you still force us off this land? He turned to her. Her eyes held fear. But more than that, they held exhaustion. A woman who had been fighting too long with too little. He exhaled slowly. No, he said. Not anymore. She blinked. Why not? Because now I've seen what I'm fighting against, he said. And it's not a piece of land. She waited. It's 5 children who deserve to live, Jesse said. And a mother trying to keep them from freezing. She swallowed. Hard. Thank you, she whispered. Jesse looked at her in the quiet snow. You don't need to thank me, he said. Just don't lose faith yet. Inside the warm glow of the cabin, the children slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. Marian lingered on the porch. Mr. Calder, she said softly. Yes. What happens after your survey? Jesse looked out over the snow, toward the mountains he had come to conquer. I don't know, he said, but I think this house might change more than one man's plans. Marian's breath caught in her chest, because she knew, and he knew, that something had begun between them, something neither expected, something neither wanted, something impossible to ignore. And the month had only just begun. Snow fell through the night, soft and steady, thick enough to muffle every sound around the old boarding house. By dawn the world was buried in white. A hush lay over the land like God himself had pressed a finger to his lips and whispered, quiet now. Watch what happens next. Inside, the house breathed with new warmth. The stove glowed bright. The air smelled of rising bread and boiled oats. Marian had found enough flour in Jesse's supply sack to make a breakfast the children hadn't tasted in months. For the first time in a long while, the Locke children woke to something other than hunger. Rose rubbed sleep from her eyes and gasped at the smell. Jacob sat upright, startled. Tom stumbled from his blanket fort, hair sticking up like straw. Millie clapped her hands without even knowing why. Even baby Elsie stirred with a soft, contented hum. Angry, broken. Jesse met her trembling gaze. No one, he said quietly, is taking your children. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. You don't understand, she whispered. These men, they have power. They have money. They have the law. Jesse leaned closer. So do I. Marian shook her head. You're one man. Yes, Jesse replied, but I'm the man who built half this company's western line. They cannot ignore me. They cannot silence me, and I will not let them ruin you. Why? She whispered again, voice cracking like thin ice. Why risk everything for us? He didn't answer for a long moment. Then he lifted her hand gently, carefully, like handling something breakable. Because someone should have done it long ago, he said, and because I will not stand by while you fight alone. Marian blinked rapidly, tears falling faster. Jesse, I'm scared. I know, he said. So stay close. Let me be scared for you. Jonas stood. You'll need proof. Evidence. Anything you can gather. I have what I need, Jesse said. Their own survey logs. Their own signatures. Their own lies. Jonas gave a faint, hopeful nod. Then come early tomorrow. I'll help in any way I can. He turned to Marian. And you, Mrs. Locke, hold your head high. Whatever they say tomorrow, remember there are good folk who know the truth. He left quietly, closing the door behind him. The children clung to Marian, sobbing quietly. She kissed each head, whispering comfort she didn't feel. Jesse watched, helpless, furious, protective. Jacob wiped his face on his sleeve. Mama won't lose us. She won't. Millie curled into Marian's lap. We stay with Mama forever. Marian hugged them tightly. Jesse placed a hand on Jacob's shoulder. I swear to you, he said, I will fight every man in that room before I let them hurt your mother. Jacob nodded fiercely, trusting him completely. When the children were finally asleep, Marian sat alone at the table, staring at nothing. Jesse approached slowly. You should try to sleep, he said softly. I can't, she whispered. He pulled out a chair and sat beside her. What are you thinking? He asked. She closed her eyes. That tomorrow, I might lose everything. Jesse leaned forward, lowering his voice to the gentlest tone she had ever heard from him. Marian, he said, look at me. She did. You won't face them alone. Not while I'm breathing. Something broke inside her. A sob escaped her throat, quiet but sharp. Jesse reached out, stopped, hesitated, then touched her cheek gently, brushing away a tear with the back of his knuckle. She didn't pull away. Outside, the wind rose again, brushing against the walls like a warning. Inside, Marian whispered, Jesse, what if fighting them destroys you? He held her gaze, steady, unshaken. Then let it, he said, because I'm not letting them destroy you. Marian's breath caught. Her heart pounded. And for the first time, she wondered if this man, this stranger who had walked into her life with snow on his coat and fire in his eyes, was becoming something far more dangerous and far more precious. Tomorrow would decide everything. The next morning broke too early. The sky over Silver Bend was pale and brittle, like it might splinter under its own cold. Frost coated the windows in thin white veins. The house was quiet, too quiet. Even the children whispered instead of speaking, as if afraid their voices might crack the fragile calm. Marian dressed Jacob, Millie, and Tom in their warmest clothes, smoothing collars with trembling hands. She braided Millie's hair 3 times before getting it right. Her fingers shook so badly she kept dropping the ribbon. Jesse noticed. He noticed everything. Marian, he said gently, sit. You haven't eaten. She managed a faint, thin smile. I couldn't swallow a thing even if I tried. Jesse poured her tea anyway. Try. But the cup shook. In her hands, the surface of the tea trembling like a disturbed pond. Across the table, the children watched their mother with wide, worried eyes. "Will they be mean to Mama?" Millie asked in a whisper. Jacob shot her a warning look, but she'd already spoken, and the fear hung in the air like smoke. Jesse leaned forward, his voice steady and certain. "I won't let them lay a finger on your mother. Not one word said against her will go unanswered. You hear me?" Millie nodded, comforted. Marian swallowed hard and murmured, "Thank you." Jesse stood and buttoned his coat. "We should leave in 15 minutes. The board meets at noon, but people will gather early." He paused at the doorway. "Marian, whatever happens today, remember this. Their power ends the moment you stop giving them fear." Marian took a trembling breath. "And if they don't stop?" Jesse's voice deepened. "Then I will stop them." The board met at the upstairs hall of the Silver Bend Mercantile, a place that smelled of dust, ledgers, and old grudges. Jesse walked beside Marian, one step half in front of her, his posture protective without being obvious. The children stayed with Jonas's wife, kept safely away from the ugliness they were about to face. As they approached, whispers rose like a tide. "There she is, Calder's widow. Think she's clever enough to play the railroad? Shameless, some women." Marian's throat tightened. Her cheeks burned. She stared straight ahead, but each word hit her like thrown stones. Jesse's jaw flexed. He walked a little closer, his presence a shield. Inside, the room was crowded. Board members, investors, a few townsfolk eager to witness a public shaming. And at the center table sat Kenton Hale, the new head of the board, a thin man with cold eyes and a colder heart. He smirked when he saw Jesse and Marian walking together. "Well," Hale drawled loudly, "looks like the rumors have arrived." Laughter scattered around the room. Marian froze. Jesse did not. He stepped forward, his voice loud enough to cut across the murmur. "You'll watch your tone, Hale." The room fell quiet. Hale only smiled wider. "Mr. Calder," he said, standing as if greeting a dear friend, "so good of you to join us. I wasn't sure you'd show, what with all your personal involvements." The insult was clear. Jesse's eyes flashed, but Marian touched his sleeve. "Don't," she whispered. "That's exactly what they want." He clenched his fist at his side, held the anger in place, but said nothing. Hale gestured to a single chair placed in the center of the room. "Mrs. Locke," he said sweetly, "please take your seat." Marian looked at Jesse, and he nodded once. She stepped forward. "Saturday. Alone." In the chair, meant to make her feel small. Hale stepped behind her, hands clasped behind his back like a preacher preparing to condemn a sinner. "Mrs. Locke," he began, "you stand before this board today because it has been brought to our attention that your behavior has been questionable." The murmurs began again. Marian lifted her chin. "What behavior, sir?" "Oh," Hale said with feigned shock, so modest. He lifted a paper. "Testimony suggests you have been using Mr. Jesse Calder to influence the railroad route, receiving gifts, provisions, and personal visits in exchange for companionship." A collective gasp swept the room. Marian went pale. "That is not true," she whispered. Hale leaned in. "Isn't it?" She swallowed hard. "I'm a widow, sir. A mother. I have no one but myself to depend on." Exactly," Hale said sharply. "Vulnerable. Desperate. Willing." Jesse stepped forward. "Enough." Hale ignored him. "You accepted supplies from Mr. Calder, did you not?" Marian hesitated. "Yes." "Clothing? Food? Firewood?" "Yes." "And he has stayed at your home many nights, has he not?" Marian flushed with shame she did not deserve. "He stayed to survey the land." "For work?" "Of course," Hale said mockingly. "For work." A few men chuckled. Jesse's voice thundered through the hall. "She's telling the truth." Hale smirked. "Then why didn't you stay in town, Calder? Why under a roof?" "Because her home is on the land. Because it's winter. Because she was freezing and starving and He stopped himself before revealing too much. Hale seized it. "Ah," he said smoothly, "so there was compassion? How touching." Jesse glared. Hale continued, voice oily. "Mrs. Locke, you stand accused of manipulating a company man to protect your land needed for progress. Land which you're not legally entitled to." You must understand our obligation is to the future, not to your personal arrangements. The words sliced her open. Marian felt her throat tighten, breath hitch, vision blur. She blinked away tears, but one escaped down her cheek. Gasps and whispers rippled through the hall. Hale softened his voice artificially. You may defend yourself now, Mrs. Locke. Marian looked at Jesse, at Jonas, at the crowd waiting for her humiliation. She stood slowly, hands trembling, voice thin but steady. I'm not a liar, she said. I'm not a schemer. I'm a mother trying to keep her children warm. People shifted uncomfortably. Her voice grew stronger. My husband died in a mine collapse. I lost our income, our home, our safety. And when this railroad came, it did not come with mercy. It came with threats. Hale snorted. Mrs. Locke, please avoid dramatics. No, she snapped. The room went still. I will not be silenced while men discuss my honor like it's currency. Jesse's eyes locked on her, pride growing behind them. Marian continued, louder. I never asked Mr. Calder for anything. He saw my children starving. He saw us burning books to stay warm. He chose to help. And I chose to accept kindness because survival leaves no room for pride. A murmur swept the hall, softer now, not mocking, but uncertain. And let me say this plainly, she said, eyes burning. If the only way to be considered moral in this town is to let my children freeze while I refuse help from a good man, then I want no part of your morality. The room broke into whispered shock. Hale's face reddened. Are you quite finished? He hissed. Marian lifted her chin. No, I'm only getting started. Hale moved to silence her, but Jesse stepped forward. He towered over the board table. Enough, Jesse growled. You want the truth? Here it is. I helped her because no one else would. I stayed in her home because the conditions of the land required it. And I supported her children because I'd rather break company rules than break 3 little hearts. Hale scoffed. So you admit bias? I admit humanity. Humanity doesn't build railroads. Heartless men don't build anything worth keeping. Jesse fired back. Gasps echoed. Hale stepped closer. Are you willing to risk your position for this woman, Calder? Jesse didn't hesitate. Gladly. Marian's breath caught. The room erupted into loud argument. Voices overlapping, accusations flying, fists pounding tables. Jesse turned toward Marian, stepping to her side. Stay behind me, he murmured. But Hale banged a gavel against the table, shouting, silence. The room quieted. He pointed at Marian. Mrs. Locke, by vote of this board, we will now decide your fate. Marian's knees weakened. Jesse moved closer, almost touching. The room watched with breathless tension. And Hale lifted his hand to begin the vote. The room went still. Not silent, still. A tight, breath-held stillness that made the air heavy, as if even the dust motes hanging in the sunlight refused to move. Kenton Hale raised his hand, ready to cast the first vote that would decide Marian's fate, her children's home, her future, everything. Board members, Hale declared, we will now vote. But before he could finish, the door behind them swung open with a force that cracked against the wall. Judge Caleb Merritt walked in. Snow clung to his coat. His boots dripped meltwater onto the wooden floor. His gray beard glistened with frost. And his eyes, God help them, were blazing. Hale's mouth fell open. Judge Merritt, what were you doing here? Caleb held up a folded document, stamped and sealed. I'm here, he growled, to stop the biggest miscarriage of justice this town has tried to commit in years. All eyes turned toward him. Marian's breath caught. Jesse straightened. Hale paled. What is that? Hale asked quietly. Caleb walked past everyone, slow and steady, until he stood beside Marian. This, he said, raising the paper, is proof that Marian Locke is the rightful owner of her land. Not a squatter, not a tenant, not a debtor, the rightful owner. The room erupted. Shouts. Disbelief. Papers rustling. Someone knocked over a chair. Hale's voice rose above them all. That's impossible. It's true, Caleb barked. Marian's hand flew to her mouth. Her knees buckled. Jesse caught her gently by the elbow. It can't be, she whispered. I don't understand. Judge Caleb turned to her, his harsh voice softening. Your late husband's land was stolen on paper years ago. The title was never valid. A fraud. A lie. The actual heirs finally surfaced and agreed to sell you clear title. Cheap, because they didn't want a railroad stealing what should have been yours. He looked straight at Hale, and I signed the transfer myself. He slapped the document onto the board table. The land belongs to Marian Locke. A wave of murmurs swept the room. Angry, shocked, confused, some relieved. Jesse exhaled a breath he seemed to have been holding for days. Marian's voice was barely a whisper. I own it? Truly. Judge Caleb nodded. Truly. She covered her face and sobbed. Jesse gently rested a hand on her shoulder. Hale slammed his fist on the table. This is outrageous. Even if the title is legal, the railroad has eminent domain. We can still take it. Caleb leaned in, eyes cold as river ice. You could try, but the law won't save you this time, Hale. Every newspaper will write about how you ignored a widow's rightful claim. Every lawyer will line up to tear your company apart. Hale sputtered. This isn't fair. Fair? Caleb roared. You want to discuss fair after the filth you've been spreading? The judge stepped closer, jabbing a finger at him. You sent Miller's boys to harass her. You slandered her. You threatened to remove her children. And now you want to cry foul because justice didn't bend your way. Hale stepped back instinctively. Jesse stepped forward instinctively. And the entire room felt the shift, the power leaving Hale and settling around Marian like a shield. Caleb turned toward the board members. Any man who votes to evict her now marks himself as a fool, a coward, or a villain. His voice boomed, and I'll fight each one of you in court until your grandchildren forget your names. Silence. Absolute. Unbroken. Hale was sweating. He looked around, desperate. Are you all seriously going to side with her? Williams, one of the older board members, stood first. I am. Then Peterson. I am. Then Rodriguez. Same here. One by one, men rose, until only Hale remained seated, trembling with rage, face burning with humiliation. You're all mad? Hale whispered. Jesse folded his arms. No, we're done letting men like you run this town. Marian wiped her tears with shaking hands. Her voice cracked. I don't know what to say. Judge Caleb gave a stiff nod. You don't have to say anything, Marian. Justice did the talking. But then his tone softened even further. You deserve this land. You deserve safety. You deserve peace. She choked on a breath. I never imagined. Jesse stepped beside her, his voice quiet but full. You fought for this place. You earned it. She looked up at him. His eyes softened. And now, he added, nobody can take it from you again. Her tears returned, but softer, warmer. Relief replacing fear. Hope replacing dread. Jesse wanted to reach for her hand. He didn't. Not yet. Hale suddenly shoved his chair back. This isn't over, he spat. You think the railroad will just give up because some dusty judge and a guilty cowboy feel sentimental? This is bigger than all of you. Jesse took one step forward. No, he said quietly. It isn't. Hale scoffed. You're nothing, Calder. A washed-up rancher with a badge no one respects. You think you can stop progress? Jesse smiled bitterly. I'm not stopping progress. I'm stopping you. Hale pointed a shaking finger at Marian. You won't win. You won't hold this land. Judge Caleb slammed his gavel on the table so hard Hale jumped. One more word, Caleb growled, and I'll hold you in contempt, right here in front of God and everybody. Hale went silent. He gathered his papers, red-faced and furious, and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him so hard the hinges rattled. And with him went the last shadow hanging over Marian's life. The board members began filing out. Some nodded respectfully at Marian. Others looked ashamed, forever believing the worst. Jonas entered quietly, hat in hand. You all right, Miss Marian? She nodded weakly. I think so. Jesse looked at Judge Caleb. Thank you, he said, voice genuinely grateful. You didn't have to come. Didn't have to put your name behind this. Yes, I did, Caleb said simply. Because you were right to fight for her. And she was right to fight for herself. He turned to Marian. You come by my office tomorrow. We'll file everything legally, stamp it, seal it. Your land will be ironclad. She nodded, wiping new tears. Thank you, Judge. Truly. The judge squeezed her hand gently. You remind me of someone I knew once. Strong, stubborn, God-fearing, and brave. She would have liked you. Then he left, leaving Jesse and Marian alone in the nearly empty hall. She turned to Jesse. He was already watching her, his eyes warm, soft, searching. Jesse, she whispered, and he stepped closer. Marian. The world outside seemed far away. The noise, the whispers, the cold, it all blurred. It was just the two of them. The widow who had fought the world for her children. The rancher who had fought his past for a future. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered, for fighting for me, for believing me. He shook his head. You don't owe me thanks. Yes, she said softly, I do. He lifted a rough hand and gently brushed a tear from her cheek. She didn't pull away. Neither did he. You saved my family, she whispered. You saved me first, he replied. She exhaled shakily. Jesse, I am scared. He nodded. So am I. What happens now, she asked. His answer was quiet. We decide. Together. Her breath trembled. You mean us? He swallowed hard. If you want there to be in U.S. She did. God, she did. But she needed to hear him say it plainly. Do you want that? She whispered. He stepped even closer. His voice was low, raw, honest. I want you, Marian Locke. I want your laughter, your stubbornness, your strength. I want your children's futures to be tied to mine. I want a home that feels alive again. His voice cracked. I want a life with you. Her breath caught. Tears blurred her vision. She placed her hand on his chest. I've wanted that, she admitted, long before I had the courage to say it. And then, slowly, hesitantly, tenderly, Jesse bent his head and kissed her. Not a desperate kiss. Not a stolen kiss. Not a forbidden kiss. A promise. A beginning. A new chapter written on the ashes of their old lives. She melted into him, hands gripping his coat, feeling the warmth she'd been denied for so long. When they finally drew apart, breathless, trembling, and changed, Jesse whispered, We'll build something good, Marian. She nodded, tears falling freely. Yes, she breathed. We will. Later that evening, as they rode back to her homestead, the children came running out the moment they saw the wagon crest the hill. Mama, Mr. Jesse, did we win? Do we get to stay? Marian climbed down, tears streaking her cheeks. Yes, she said, voice shaking with joy. We're staying. Forever. The children cheered, hugging her, hugging each other. Jesse watched, heart full. Marian stepped toward him. Come inside, she said softly. Come home. He smiled. For the first time in years, the smile reached his eyes. He took her hand, walked toward the warm glow of the house. And for the first time, the place felt like it belonged to both of them. If you felt this tale in your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Wild West Emotional Tales, where every story rides through the dust, the danger, and the kind of love that never dies. See you in the next tale, partner.